So, this past weekend was the NHL All Star game in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. MLSC went out. MLSC went out of their way to make it fun. I will give them that much. So I ended up going for 3 of the 4 days that things were going on. They had their NHL fanfare that they were fanfare, not fanfare like with trumpets, but fanfare, like a festival thing for fan. You get the idea. Okay. Okay, so we're in. Damn this. Yo, this is nice. God damn. Okay, Toronto. Okay. I think the last fan fest I went to was Nashville for the draft. And that was a good time. Like, curious to see how Toronto handled it. It looked really good. It was really cool. They were holding that for 4 days. I went to 3 of the 4 days. It's the same thing every day, but like, you do whatever when you want there. A couple events going on here and there. The only catch, obviously, was you're wondering, hey, so do you have footage from like the All Star game and like the skills competition? Did you go? No, because that's expensive, and I don't have money. But I did have money to at least go to the fair, go to some events, and get a jersey. Yeah, that was money. And yet I didn't. Well, like, okay, like an All Star ticket's like $500 more. Like, it's expensive. Who can afford that? I couldn't. You know? The fanfare was definitely a little overwhelming at first. I think I did not expect it to be that grand, even though it was only one half of the convention center in Toronto. But it was still a fun time. So I went, saw a bunch of people that I knew. Shout out to those. Got to see players walk the red carpet, which that took forever. Like, they were like, yeah, it's starting at 3. It started at like 3:15. Like, Faisal Khamisa's up there trying to get the crowd hyped up for players to come out. It was just like, for the most part, kind of dead, except for obviously when the Leafs came out, because it's Toronto. I get that. But that started late. It just took so long. It felt like it was taking forever, and then they took a break in between. The problem, too, and like, this just looked right at the fanfare that I had. Whichever side of the building you were on, you were kind of stuck there until the red carpet stuff ended. So, you know, players are walking by. There's Austin Matthews. There's Nathan McKinnon, Rasmus Dahlin, noted Detroit Red Wing, Alexander DeBrincat. I pointed to the Leafs hat underneath the Red Wings flag that I have. That's ironic. Anyway, Alex DeBrincat was there, of course. David Pastrnak, you know, you name them, they were there. Leon Draisaitl, all there to say hi, take photos, pictures, and sign things, and, you know. But yeah, so day one was more just like kind of getting used to what was going on for the weekend and seeing like what kind of shenanigans were people up to. Yeah, we'll come back tomorrow probably. SDPN live is tomorrow. The day of recording this, it's Thursday. SDPN live is tomorrow. I'm excited for that. Asian Provocateur live should be really fun. I'm excited to hear Alan Wallace in person. Yeah. And that's that, I guess, for today. Back tomorrow. So, day 2 of the NHL All Star weekend, which was the day of the skills competition, Friday, for me was a really wild day. It started with me getting up in the morning to get work done, having to get more work done before I even left, having like 20 minutes to get changed into a jersey, and then a friend of mine came with me, so I had to meet up with her. Get in a car, drive down, get to the GO station, go down, get to the event, hung around the fair for a couple hours, and then it was off to the rec room, which, great building, great place, for the SDPN live event day 1, their all-star takeover. And if you don't know what the SDPN is, that is the Steve Dangle Podcast Network. I think that's what it stands for. Steve, you can correct me if you ever see this, or Adam, or Jesse, or Justin, any of you, if you want to correct me on that, go ahead. But hosted by the SDP, the Steve Dangle Podcast, which is Steve Dangle, of course, Toronto legend, Leafs legend, Adam Wilde, Jesse Blake, former producer for Sportsnet, and now one of the big boys of the SDP. But it's their podcast that they've been doing for a long time, and they turned into a whole network of podcasts over the last couple of years. It's become their full-time job, which has been cool to see that whole journey, you know? And this is going to be sort of like my little time talking about that, because those guys kind of made me realize that this is you can do a lot with this, with the whole podcasting world, you know. So the SDPN All Star Takeover consisted of 3 live podcasts through the, I believe, 3 total hours it was. First up was Agent Provocateur with Adam Wilde and hosted by noted player agent and member of Octagon Sports Management, Alan Walsh, who's been a player agent for the better part of 30 years, I believe. Very long time he's been a part. Lovely man, too. Got to say hi to him. He was very nice to talk for a bit. Tell me a great story about Steve Yzerman. A lot of stories about Steve Yzerman I heard that day. So they have a whole thing. You can see it on their YouTube channel. They did a whole live podcast with Alan and Adam, and Alan just talking about stories of, you know, being a player agent and things like that. And it's so much fun to hear him talk. You know, I realized this with podcasts, with media, interviews, even like clinics I would go to when I was in music school. It's so much fun to just hear people talk sometimes, because there's this energy in their body when they speak, where you're like, oh my God, they're people, right? They're just people. They're just people that enjoy what they do, and you get to enjoy the stories they tell. Almost kind of like living vicariously through that other person. So Alan tells a bunch of stories here and there, you know. So it goes. A little Q&A. A lot of boos for Mr. Bettman, of course. We don't like Gary Bettman. No. No, we don't. So with the news of the Olympics, of course, Agent Provocateur, Alan Walsh was talking about it, how the details financially make sense for them to finally let players go, why they didn't go to Pyeongchang in South Korea, why didn't they go to Beijing, the reasons behind that, and why everything makes sense for them to go to Milan, which is where the next Winter Olympics are, in 2026, right? And then in France in 2030, which I think will be cool. And at the end of the day, the best part about this is that we're finally getting best on best hockey again. That is going to be so much fun to have best on best hockey. We get to see Connor McDavid suit up for Team Canada. We might see him on a line with Brad Marchand. We might see him on a line with Mitch Marner. We might see him on a line with Nathan McKinnon. You know how sick that's going to be? Like Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and like maybe Connor Bedard could be on a line together. I don't know if Connor Bedard makes first line of that team, but you get the idea. That was the first hour. At some point, I got hungry. I had something to eat. Talked to some people that we were sitting around. Shout out to Nick Basra, who is on TikTok and Instagram. Runs a fun little channel there. Has a great interview with Sheldon Saray if you ever get to check it out. Shout out to Nick. And then the second segment of STP All Star Takeover was, of course, the Chris Johnston Show, starring insider and reporter Chris Johnston. And for so long, even though it's called the CJ Show, for so long I thought that the J in the CJ Show was for Julian, Chris and Julian, because it's hosted by Julian McKenzie, where CJ, he just asks CJ everything, and CJ just talks. And CJ talking is a beautiful thing, because that man is so knowledgeable about so many things, and like Alan, there's this boyish charm to the way he speaks that I just found so cool. You know? So now CJ's answering questions, he's talking to Julian, they're having their fun, they're doing all these things. And after their segment was done, it was a little bit of time between that and STP Live, that's where the shenanigans really come. And I went to go talk to CJ. I went to go talk to CJ for a little bit. I said, hey, Siege, I'm a big fan of yours. You know, guys like you and Elliot Friedman have been such inspirations to me. And I'll get to the other inspirations in a sec, because I have a lot, being a guy that didn't go to journalism school or broadcasting or anything like that. I have 2 music degrees. One of them's up there. But there's the stuff I love and the stuff I listen to on a regular basis. And so Siege and I, had a little chat, and he was super nice to talk a little bit. Told me also another really funny story, not funny, but actually kind of cool story about Steve Yzerman from when he was younger. And at some point sat back down. Then it was time for SDP Live. Oh, man. So as I said in the beginning, Steve, Adam, and Jesse are very big influences on my sports fandom life. Long time ago, I was in a very rough place. And watching Steve's videos helped me get through that, especially when the Red Wings were god-awful. And the Steve Dangle podcast helped me, just learn more about the insides of the hockey world. Because before then, I just knew some numbers and just liked watching hockey games. That was really it. But I've become more of a nerd because of them. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm going to say it's a good thing. Cool? Cool. Anyway, so Steve Dangle and the boys come outside to the stage, set to American Venom from Red Dead Redemption 2. Man, what a theme. Oh, Red Dead 2 is one of my favorite games. I think actually might be my favorite game of all time. It just so happens to be one of Steve's favorite games of all time. And he loves that game. So do I. Oh my God. We're like twins. Except he's like older than me. And, you know, yeah. They come out to American Venom, crowd gets hyped, you know, all that. They hit the music, SDP live.
Maybe you can wrap it.
Yeah, no, I think we're done.
We're all done, yeah.
So listen.
Coming.
Well done, guys.
With your hosts, Steve Dangle, Adam Wild, and Jesse Blake.
All right. Hey, let's go.
They start talking about, you know, the big story of the day, which you would think was something else. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, and I'm not gonna talk about it, but it's another big thing, and that was that Gary Bettman had a press conference that day, and Chris Johnson talked about it a lot as well, regarding the NHL finally going back to the Olympics. Took long enough, and the pseudo World Cup that they're going to be hosting, called the Four Nations Tri-Wizard Tournament. Is that what it's called? Is it called the Tri-Wizard Tournament? It's not what it's called, is it? It's the Four Nations Wizard Chess. I don't remember. Four Nations Face Off? I think that's the actual name of it. Anyway, that's going to be consisted of the U.S., I thought I said the U.S. twice. The U.S., Canada, Sweden, and Finland. So the four countries that are going to be competing in this first mini World Cup thing. Games are going to be played in Boston and Montreal, which will be cool. And then just talking about the details of it, and I should have mentioned this earlier with Asian Provocateur, but the news of the Olympics being a thing, that's just the big thing, right? Like everyone was talking about it. So yeah, Steve Dangle podcast. They do their whole thing. They do their shtick. They talk. And earlier that night, a bunch of people were looking out to a corner of the rec room, and I'm like, what's everyone looking at? I'm like, is Alan Walsh walking around? He's talking about swords. Is Adam Wilde talking about divorce? Is Steve there? I don't know. And then a friend of mine, the friend I went with, just sort of taps me on the shoulder, and she goes, look. I go, who? And I turn around, and there's Sid Seixeiro, host of Breakfast Television here in Toronto, and formerly one half of one of the greatest duos in Canadian sports media history, Tim and Sid. He is the Sid part of it, if you did not know. Oh my God. Watching him just go on rants all the time, wild. Just wild. I do that not on TV, and I wish I could do that on TV. And Sid's a big reason why I wish I could, because it just seems like the fact that he has an outlet to do that was incredible. Had an outlet. And Tim and Sid were a big part of me watching sports growing up and getting updates on things when they were on the Score, and then eventually when they went to Sportsnet. So Sid Seixeiro comes on stage.
The Portuguese Michael Bublé. Ladies and gentlemen, Sid Seixeiro. Look at this guy. He's all dressed up and everything, and he's been up since 4 in the morning to be here.
And they're talking about every little thing. They're talking about Michael Bublé, because that was a whole thing. He was not on drugs, might I say. They were talking about him being the Portuguese Michael Bublé, which I guess is true when you think about it. It's not. They started talking about the Leafs, because we're in Toronto. Of course we're going to be talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. He asks the question, do you think that the cap has been mismanaged by the Leafs? And you could hear a pin drop. You could hear a pin drop in that room. And then for about 2 or 3 minutes, it didn't feel like that short. It felt like a while. Sid went on his famous Sid Seixeiro rant.
And I'm going to unnecessarily walk up and down the stage.
You're gonna laugh.
Winning a Stanley Cup means 2.5 months of playing games every other night, blood, sweat, and tears. Thank you, sir. Which means you need crazy MFers to go out there, like Vegas had, like Colorado's had. Where's Drew? There you go. I was hoping you weren't there. Like every other team we've ever seen in the history of this league over 2.5 months.
And he just went off about the cap. He went off about the Leafs not having crazy MFers, as he says, to do any damage in the playoffs.
Do you believe the Leafs have those guys?
Wow, I'm surprised.
My job is done.
And the crowd was honest. They know that this Leafs team right now doesn't have what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. So, there's a lot of questions to be asked. The trade deadline is in 5 weeks. There's a lot going on. Anyway, that was day one. I got a picture with Sid. I got to talk to Alan. I got to talk to CJ as well. Just being in the presence of all those guys has been really cool. It's like you get to learn so much from just hearing them talk. And just remember they're people at the end of the day. So yeah, and then there was day 2 of the SDPN stuff, or day 3 of the whole All Star festivities. Got in the morning, except the TTC was running late, so I was like, great, whatever, right? Got to the rec room again for day 2 of the All Star takeover, and man, I was so sad that Edge couldn't be there because he kind of had some stuff to do with other people that were paying him to be there, which fair enough, right? But no, it was cool. Adam Wild's mom showed up. That was great. Marilyn Dennis was there. Got to say hi. She got to talk about Adam starting this podcast in her basement, more or less, and how it's grown since then. And every parent doesn't know what their kid does for a living, which I completely feel. My parents have no idea. I just sit in this room and talk or play music all day. So, and then Sean McIndoe, Mark Lazarus, Greg Wyshynski, all from The Athletic came down. Talked about just everything with the All-Star game and how boring the Florida All-Star game was last year. Things to think about for the trade deadline. And that finished up. CJ and Julian came out again. Had a little chat. That was a little fun time. And then the trio came out once more. Answered some questions. The night wrapped up. Or not even night. It finished at like 3 p.m. 2 or 3 p.m. Something like that. And by that time, the All-Star game was about to start. So because I didn't have a ticket for the All-Star game, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to hang around downtown. I'm going to go see some people. Did whatever I could to kill some time. And then Dangle and the SDP had a whole after party. Went to do that. Had some really fun hangover after. Am I allowed to even say that on camera? I'm going to say it anyway. Yeah, that was fun. Had some great conversations. And this is something I really wanted to get to, was being a musician is fun because sometimes the people you meet, especially those that are like the people you like idolize or that are big influences on you, some of them aren't so nice. But a lot of people I've so far met in this sports media world that I've met at this All-Star event and I met at the draft last year in Nashville, they've been really cool. I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are. Just to have those conversations with all you guys has been great for me, just to start thinking about things and how I want to get things going. But yeah, All-Star weekend was fun. Team Matthews won the All-Star game. Am I happy about that? I should be, because Alex DeBrincat was on that team and he did great and didn't win MVP. So that's why I don't feel great about it. So you know what I mean? Like, anyway, fun weekend, super cool. I really hope the All-Star Game's back in Toronto again sometime soon for the NHL. I know the MLB is trying, so that might be cool if they get it in like 2028, 9, something like that. Yeah,